Hey, tailgaters! Ross of the Pigskin Tales podcast here. The buzz of summer and the anticipation of the college football season is in the air. It's the perfect time to gear up with Home Field, a premium collegiate apparel brand based in Indianapolis. They have over 150 plus college designs to choose from, each one showcasing a unique part of your team's history. My personal experience with Home Field has been exceptional. Their apparel is comfortable and their vintage designs bring back fond memories of my alma mater. So as the excitement for the upcoming college football season builds, make sure to visit Home Field's website at homefieldapparel.com. Get ready today for the upcoming season and represent our favorite teams in style with Home Field. Again, that's homefieldapparel.com.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
Hello, sports fans, and welcome to another edition of Yesterday's Sports on the Sports History Network. You can call me old-fashioned, not with the times, a dinosaur, but I miss 1970s football. Perhaps it meant so much to me because of my age. I was 8 years old in 1970 and 17 years old in 1979. For most people, so many of life's memories are between the ages of 8 and 17. I can remember it all like it was yesterday. I played football and watched it with equal enthusiasm. 1970s NFL football was and still is a big part of my life. I was, and as my wife can attest to, sometimes still obsessed with it. My interest started with 1969 Topps football cards. I read and studied those cards over and over. Then I started reading football books and magazines and watching the games on TV. I was hooked. It was like an addiction. I watched all the football shows that were on TV at the time. There was This Is the NFL, This Week in Pro Football, the NFL Game of the Week, NFL Films with Ed and Steve Sable. I was like an encyclopedia on NFL football. I knew every player, every statistic, every score, and every team's record and history. I absolutely loved it. Then, suddenly, I wasn't 17 anymore. And the 1970s became the 1980s. Football was still a big part of my life, but not the same way it was in the 1970s. I grew into adulthood and did the things that adults do, like go to work, move out of my parents' house, get my own house, get married, have children, and pay the bills. Football wasn't as important anymore. Not only had I changed, but the game had changed too. Many rule changes took place in the 1980s, and today's game bears little resemblance to the game I watched and played in the 1970s. I pretty much stopped watching football altogether around 16 years ago. Up until a few years ago, I'd watch some of the playoff games and the Super Bowl, but I don't even watch that anymore. The modern game bores me. I'd much rather go to YouTube and watch a game from the 1970s than any of the current games. Not only does that bring back fond memories, but it's fun to compare how the game was then and what it has become. Football today has become big business, entertainment at its best, or worst, depending on your opinion. The conflict for me is I'm not interested in entertainment. I'm interested in football. So let us take a look at 1970s football compared to today's game. We'll start with the pregame show. In the 1970s, the pregame show was 30 minutes. I always looked forward to watching Brent Musburger, Irv Cross, Phyllis George, and Jimmy the Greek. They would talk about the game scheduled for that day, talk about the players, give an opinion, or give an injury update. Then Jimmy the Greek would make his predictions, and it was time to kick the ball off. Today we have hours and hours of non-stop blabbering, and the never-ending question, what's the key to the game? We get the same answers as always. Don't turn the ball over. Don't commit too many penalties. Don't make stupid mistakes. Put pressure on the quarterback. Do they think we don't already know this? From the opening kickoff, I'm annoyed. Every stadium must now have loud, booming music blasting from the PA system. I guess the game itself is not enough to hold the interest of the average fan. The football is now kicked off from the 35-yard line instead of the 30-yard line. The ball usually goes into the end zone and is down for a touchback, removing one of the most exciting plays in the game. I'm talking, of course, about the kickoff return. When's the last time you saw a return man break off a big return? Or better yet, take it all the way for a touchdown? It hardly ever happens anymore. I understand the NFL wants to cut down on injuries, but come on. You can't take away one of the most exciting plays in the game. But they did. Since there are very few kickoff returns now, the receiving team starts at the 25-yard line, and immediately the passing frenzy begins. The percentage of passing plays in the NFL today is much higher than the percentage of running plays. The opposite was the case in the 1970s. The rules have changed drastically to allow for more passing, and more passing means more scoring. But for old school fans like me, there was nothing like watching a strong running attack. There were so many great running backs in the 1970s and the 1980s as well. John Riggins, Tony Dorsett, Walter Payton, Eric Dickerson, Larry Zonka, Franco Harris, Earl Campbell, and more. These guys and a strong offensive line could take over a game. With a dominant running attack, you didn't need to throw the ball a lot. Take, for example, the 1972 and 1973 Miami Dolphins. So dominant was their ground game that quarterback Bob Greasy only threw the ball a combined 18 times in Super Bowls 7 and 8. We old school football fans miss the great defensive battles of the 1970s. Scores like 13-6, 10-7, and 7-3 weren't unusual. With defenses like the Doomsday Defense, the Over the Hill Gang, the Purple People Eaters, the Fearsome Foursome, the No Name Defense, the Orange Crush, and last but not least, the Steel Curtain. High scoring was not at a premium. Well, that concludes part 1 of this podcast. Tune in again next week and we will have part 2 of this 3-part series on why I miss 1970s football. Hope you enjoyed it. Thank you, and God bless.
Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, aka the Football History Dude, and I wanted to thank you for stopping by to listen to another episode here on the Sports History Network. Our podcasters are passionate about uncovering and sharing sports stories from yesteryear. And if you didn't know it already, we have over 30 shows across the network covering all sorts of sports history topics. In fact, here's a glimpse into one of our awesome podcasts here on the network.
Hello, football friends. This is Darren Hayes of the Pigskin Dispatch podcast, and I'd like to invite you to the portal of positive football history, Pigskin Dispatch and pigskindispatch.com. We talk about everything that centers around the game of American football, expert discussions, the origins of the games, the great players, teams, and coaches, and more, and some great guests and insights from experts. We have new episodes 3 to 4 times a week, and you can find us on sportshistorynetwork.com, pigskindispatch.com, or your favorite podcast provider.
How about that? I bet you're super hyped to go listen to that new podcast, right? Well, to learn about this show and all the other podcasts on the network, head over to sportshistorynetwork.com/podcasts. Again, that's sportshistorynetwork.com/podcasts. Head over there today to find your next favorite sports history podcast.